Aloha, everybody. This is Ralph Winnie Jr. We're going to discuss trading around the world with my very good friend, Ambassador Dimitrios Tsikouris. He was ambassador starting in 1994 as part of the NATO Defense College and was the former Greek ambassador to Iran, Italy, and Belgium. And his last assignment was in Indonesia and Malaysia. And Ambassador Tsikouris was also the permanent representative of Greece to the ASEAN. And then in 2010, he went into private practice. So, Ambassador Tsikouris, we're going to discuss what's your definition of diplomacy, how diplomacy impacts culture, how diplomacy impacts crisis management, and finally, how does diplomacy impact business? So I'll let you start. I know you spent time in Hawaii and you're very fond of the experience.
Let me start by thanking you for this initiative of yours to put me on this show. And I also want to extend a word of thanks, but also of congratulations to ThinkTech Hawaii for what they're doing. What really drew my attention when I looked on the site was the emphasis they put on public awareness and civic engagement, two pillars of democracy. We need to promote public awareness. We need to promote civic engagement. And the very father of international relations, Thucydides, the writer of the Peloponnesian War, he was the one who pointed out that a citizen that does not participate in public affairs is a useless person. I want to draw another example from recent times why public awareness and why civic engagement is so important, and therefore highlight in this way the work that ThinkTech Hawaii is doing. You may recall 20 years ago the effort by the European Union to substitute all treaties, the one on top of the other, were building the European Union starting from March 25th, 1957, the Treaty of Rome, all the way up to the Maastricht Treaty, and then finally to the European Constitution that unfortunately was never ratified. The European Constitution was a major effort to put in one single text all the laws establishing the European Union, what today called the European Union, then European Economic Community. Well, as it happens, the structure of the European Union is such that the private citizen has no saying. The draft of the European Constitution, in order to promote public awareness, to promote civic engagement, provided that if 1 million votes are gathered from 8 different states within the European Union, then the Commission is obliged to enact and either adopt, propose. In other words, they were given, the citizens, the average citizens, were given a floor to speak, because as the situation is now, and it has always been like this since the Treaty of Rome, it's the Council of Ministers that proposes to the Commission and vice versa, and the private citizen has no say indirectly.
Right.
So, unfortunately, as you know, this draft of the European Constitution was not voted upon in 2004, and this may be one reason why the European Union is not doing as well as they could do if that European Constitution had been adopted. You mentioned my links to Hawaii. Yes, I was very privileged to have visited all 5 islands many years ago.
What's your favorite island?
Well, I know I know the island you come from, but my favorite island indeed is Maui, the island I stayed, and more particularly Lahaina, the former capital, correct?
Yes.
So I was privileged to visit all 5 islands and take a glimpse of the beauty of the beaches, of the beautiful beaches, but also of the history, visiting the site of the attack on December 7th, 1941. Actually, this is best described in a book written by my professor and friend, Stephen Ambrose, America's Rise to Globalism, where he describes the events after 1938 and the attack. Yes, Hawaii has remained very deep in my heart, and now I'm delighted that I have the opportunity via you to connect again with Hawaii and the audience there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, you asked me about the, if I may start with the first question you touched upon. I think you asked me about the definition of diplomacy. Well, there are so many indeed, but I guess my favorite one is the one that goes like this. Diplomacy is the art of telling someone to go to hell in such a way,
Okay.
in such a way that he
Yeah.
looks forward to the trip. In other words, you may say the worst things in such a nice way
Yeah.
that your interlocutor may be happy with. However, it was a British diplomat, Nicholson, who 100 years ago in the 1920s wrote a book which is the Bible for all diplomats. It's called On Diplomacy. And then the 7 characteristics of a good diplomat are given.
Okay.
Believe it or not, the first one is truthfulness. Truthfulness.
Mhm.
That saved me more than one time in my career as a diplomat.
What is the most poignant example of that?
Oh, wow. Well, I guess after so many years, I can tell you. I was in my diplomatic career, I served for years as ambassador to Iran, which was a very interesting country, but not a usual assignment, let's say this way. Well, there were some negotiations going on where I had to use my imagination in order to achieve a purpose. But in the end, one after the other, my arguments were not standing. And then I had to ask my interlocutor to come out one-on-one and explain to him what the real situation was and how things were. I explained to him that I'm going by rule number 1 by Nicholson, truthfulness. If you appreciate what I'm saying, then these negotiations will go on. I'm not going into specifics. And indeed, that was appreciated. And I realized that if you explain to your interlocutor, even if you are in very opposing camps, so to speak, if you explain the situation as is, you have more chances to arrive at your target than going the other, quote unquote, diplomatic ways.
When you've had to engage with your Turkish counterpart,
Yes.
did you find truthfulness was very effective?
Absolutely. And I can give you a good example of this. One of the many obstacles with relations with NATO ally Turkey is the situation regarding the refugees, which is used at times by the neighboring country as a weapon for pressure.
Okay.
But the pressure is not just for Greece, it's for the whole European Union, because it happens the border with Greece is a border with the European Union. So the specific example that I will give you is the following. On the year 2003, October 2003, Greece and Turkey signed an agreement whereby Turkey is obliged to take back whatever gets illegally into Greece, into Europe practically. So a year exactly to the day later, October 2004, I was sent to Ankara, heading a big delegation from Greece to negotiate with our neighbors, or rather to find out why they were not applying the agreement. As a matter of fact, there were only 6 cases. The answer I got from my colleague was that in view of the then European vocation, which is not any longer valid, as you know, in view of the then European vocation that Turkey had then, they were assuring me that they will apply from now on the agreement. But thereupon, I made to them a proposal which I had prepared before leaving Athens, as a matter of fact. I asked them to empty our prisons and take back the refugees that had been illegally entering Greece and were detained. And by Greek law, they're detained there for 3 months and then they have to leave the country. Well, to make short, that was an oral agreement that we discussed and was achieved. We explained truthfully the arguments, the one to the other, and that agreement was obtained. It was my personal initiative, and again, as I said, I had to rely on the word of my colleague. He did what he promised, and all these illegally detained, people who had illegally Greece were sent back to Turkey. But this is a problem still going on, as you know. But we can discuss it later when we go to relations with Greece and Turkey. Thank you.
Sure. Can you talk about the intersection of sports, diplomacy, and peace building? And does your definition of diplomacy include sports?
Yes, I know you're personally interested in this because you're practicing an ancient Greek Roman sport, which is wrestling.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which brings me, as a matter of fact, now, since we're talking about Iran, you should know that they are very good in this sport, particularly. But yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Through sport and through practicing sport, diplomacy can be achieved. And as a matter of fact, not just in the area of wrestling, but in many other practices. You may remember that it was in 1896 that the Olympic Games started again in Greece. And in ancient times, as you know, there was the custom of ekechiria, which means truce. The city-states in ancient Greece could stop war in order to carry out the Olympic Games, always taking place in the same site in present-day Olympia.
Sure.
So that's a good example from ancient times how diplomacy affects sports. They would, I mean, what a better example to give than this? They would stop war in order to carry out Olympic Games. In modern times, as you know, unfortunately, sport has been affected by politics. I will go back to the Munich events of 1972, if I remember.
The massacre of the Israelis.
Yes, yes, indeed. But all in all, an excellent means for promoting relations among countries and promoting diplomacy is sport, absolutely.
And how does diplomacy impact crisis management? And can you give us some examples of what
absolutely.
you have done in that area?
Yes, 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 absolutely. As you may have seen in my CV, and I think I should say one word about it very quickly. I served in my career 4 years in Germany, then 4 years as consul of Greece in New Orleans, Louisiana, covering 8 states in the South. Then 4 years in the Greek embassy of Washington, D.C. Then I was, after a NATO competition, I was the first Greek to be a faculty advisor at the NATO Defense College in Rome, where crisis management is a must. Then I served at the Greek embassy in Rome, as you said earlier, ambassador to Iran, ambassador to Belgium, ambassador to Malaysia, Indonesia, till my retirement. Crisis management, NATO Defense College. NATO Defense College is established as an idea for Eisenhower. As you know, NATO was set up in 1949, April 4th to be exact. And 2 years later, at the inspiration of Eisenhower, the NATO Defense College is established in Paris. Then in 1966, they moved to Rome. Why? Because then France moved out of the military side of the alliance. And as it happens, the NATO Defense College comes out the military part of NATO. So it moved to Rome, and I joined them in 1989, and I served there till 1995 as a faculty advisor, a great experience. One of the highlights there is crisis management. Crisis management is essential for a diplomat, particularly if institutionally has been assigned with such a task, as it was my case repeatedly. I will give you a specific example. We're back in 2004, December 26, when this major catastrophe happens in Thailand, Indonesia, tsunami.
Yes.
People get drowned, people get lost.
Yeah.
And I was then assigned institutionally, as I was serving in Athens, Greece then, and I was responsible for the, let's say, well-being of Greeks abroad. So I remember it was 11 o'clock in the morning. I heard on BBC News what happens, and I rushed to the ministry, and I did not get out before another 10 days. Why? I set up, this is crisis management. You're faced with a situation when you don't know if your nationals are at peril, how you save them, what do you do? So in crisis management, what is essential is coordination and quick decisions, split moment decisions. Time is of essence. Well, in a nutshell, Greece was the first country within the European Union to send an aeroplane empty to Thailand, Bangkok, Thailand, Phuket actually, to bring back survivors. But that was not enough. I had to do more than that. So I put 300 empty passports, diplomatic ones. I put aboard 2 young diplomats who were coming to take service at the ministry, but instead I sent them to the airport. And I also asked a number 2 at the Greek embassy in Thailand to join them. And their task was to find if there were Greek survivors. But at the same time, I sent a telegram to the crisis unit to the European Commission, advising them that Greece had already sent an aeroplane on the spot, and most probably, it was the case, there would be many empty seats. So if they would please advise the other nations, Italians, British, and so on. As it happened, the following day, a full plane came back, all appearing as Greek diplomats, because they, as I can imagine, they had no, they were in the bathing suits.
Right.
So they came to Greece with Greek passports, and people were saved.
Wonderful.
That's one of many crisis management examples. I can give you more. What is essential in these cases is that there is a central coordination. As Ulysses says in the Iliad, as he talks to the Achaeans, I will say this in the original Greek: "Is kyranos esto." It should be only one king. It should be only one person taking decisions. That's the meaning. So in crisis management, it is essential that we have coordination, but one man who takes the responsibility, and as quick as possible. Unfortunately, as I speak today, there are so many fires raging for 7 days now on the beautiful island of Rhodes, southeast Greece, as well as in Corfu, northwest Greece, and other parts of Greece, but not only here. Palermo, Italy, now is suffering from similar flames. I had more than 30 dead in Algeria, I think in northern Africa today. So southern of Europe is suffering right now as we talk. And what is needed here in this case is coordination and quick action. At many times, we have so many victims because 2 of these elements, or one of them, is missing.
And how does diplomacy impact business? You've been in private business since 2010. Talk about your experience making that transition from the diplomatic corps into business.
My dream as a young boy was to become a diplomat.
Why?
I amuse myself because when I open my American account, and at times I mess it up and I have to, they have to identify, then there comes the question, what was the job you wanted to do? And it's so easy for me because I said ambassador. I knew I always wanted to be an ambassador. That's the usual question coming out. But my second job, when I got into private service, surpassed my dreams, and it was even better than the previous one because I did not have the harnesses and the restrictions of yes minister, if you see what I mean, in the
Yes.
private. So yes, indeed, diplomacy affects directly business development. This is the reason why so many firms would hire a retired diplomat, because he would be the link between 2 points that are very interested in each other, but they don't know each other. Let me bring you a specific example. In 2015, my good friend Asa Hutchinson, who was twice governor, as you know, in Little Rock, Arkansas, and he's now a candidate for the presidency, signed a memorandum of understanding at the State House of Arkansas with the president of Da Nang province, Vietnam.
Ah,
In other words, I brought 2 dots, the province of South Vietnam and the companies there, in touch with Arkansas. And they signed a memorandum of understanding and of economic cooperation and so on. I remember a year later, 2016 must have been, I was the representative of the law firm I was working for to the Clinton Global Initiative. And President Clinton ended his remarks by ending, this is the 50th anniversary. No, 20th, I'm sorry. This is the 20th anniversary of reconciliation with Vietnam. We lost 50,000. I remember his words. We lost 50,000. Now Vietnam is our best ally. And then he stepped off the podium. I followed him and I showed him the picture of, I said, Mr. President, this is your successor many generations after you, Asa Hutchinson, signing a memorandum. And look at the flags, the American flag, the Arkansas flag, and the flag of Vietnam.
oh.
And he replied to me, this is the exemplification of what I meant.
That is fascinating, Ambassador Tsikouris. And the relations between the U.S. and Vietnam, I think, have steadily improved. As we
Absolutely,
know,
yeah.
as we
Yeah.
know, they're very concerned about engagement with China, and they're looking towards making the U.S. one of their largest trading partners. Did you
Yeah.
find that was happening?
You are an expert on China, you know much better than I do. But this is the case indeed.
So, what advice would you give to people that are entering the Foreign Service and would like to make a difference? We have 5 minutes left.
We have 5 minutes left. Well, it depends which foreign service, to be exact, which country. But the advice I would have to give is loyalty, absolutely loyalty, dedication, service. Loyalty, dedication, service. Since we only have 4 minutes, we need to touch also on the second leg of the title of our interview, the impact of diplomacy on culture.
Sure. Yeah.
And I wanted to give some specific examples to our audience,
Okay.
how this can be linked. What is the impact of diplomacy on culture? I think, going back to my career as a diplomat, one of the most important things I was able to do when I was a young consul in New Orleans, Louisiana, through a fundraising effort, we set up the Center of Greek Studies at the University of Florida.
Oh.
This exists today. I was invited 2013, and I was so happy to see that this is part of the University of Florida, and they're giving also master degrees. The topic of my lecture there was what diplomacy owes to Greek classical studies, which brings me to an example of how culture is linked with diplomacy. You may recall the famous Argonautic expedition that in mythology took place 100 years before the Trojan War, let's say 14th century. Well, there is an exact copy of that boat that was also funded with money from the European Union and is ready to sail not to sail, with volunteers to follow exactly the same route, departing from mentioned Iolkos, which is next to the city of Volos, central Greece. And by oaring, they should cross the Dardanelles, they should cross the Dardanelles Strait and go into the Black Sea till they arrive to present-day Georgia, which is supposedly the place where the Golden Fleece was laying. But as we are ready for the preparations and I'm participating in the final meeting with the minister, et cetera, we hear that the Turkish Minister of Foreign Affairs advised the Greek Minister of Foreign Affairs then that Turkey was not giving permission for this ship to cross the straits. Oh, disaster.
Yeah.
What do you do then? What do you do? You are a diplomat there and you have to advise them. As a matter of fact, the organizers told the minister, well, we're private Greek citizens. We don't need your help. We'll go on our own. I said, yes, but remember the gray wolves may be on the shore. So please follow my advice and follow the route described by Herodotus. I said, I don't have the text with me here, but I will bring it tomorrow. So the father of history, Herodotus, born 484 in Halikarnassos, he describes a myth according to which the Argonauts, many centuries before him, when they started coming back, they crossed the Evxinos Podos, as we call it, they crossed the Black Sea, they went up a river, the river is Danube, they founded a city, the city is Ljubljana, the capital of Slovenia. And if you look at the flag of the city of Ljubljana, who is on the flag? Jason, the founder, the mythological founder of the city.
Hey.
So in a word, I told them, well, since our neighbors do not give permission, why don't you follow on the opposite route, exactly what Herodotus described? And that's what they did. They departed from Volos because according to the myth, after they founded Ljubljana, after they founded the city that later became Ljubljana,
Yeah.
They followed a river that brought them all the way to the Adriatic Sea, and then they sailed down the Adriatic Sea up to back to Greece. So I advised them to follow the opposite route. So they departed from Volos up the Adriatic Sea, up to they reached the point where they landed with the ship. So a diplomatic problem was solved because culture was there to show a solution. Herodotus in this case. So that's one example how culture can be of help to diplomacy.
Well, I think that's a great way to end. Thank you so much for providing your expertise and insight. And we look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please click the like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Check out our website, thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.